Now then, everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about Daniel Farke because I do think we're at the time where Leeds fans are genuinely split on what next for him and what next for his time at Leeds United. So yes, of course, he got us promoted. He stabilised us after relegation in the Premier League prior. And he got us promoted, which being the main thing, winning the league last season, 100 points. What a great season and achievement that was for him in the squad. But we now find ourselves hovering around 16th in the Premier League. Performances are looking very, very flat, not the same as when we first started against Everton. And, you know, after a run of games, including West Ham, Forest and Burnley, to only pick up 3 points in that run is very, very poor. So really, I want to be honest and look. Let's have a look into Daniel Farke, his time this season, and is he the man to take us forward? Now, of course, Daniel Farke took on a team of Leeds that was broken, falling apart. Fans and the board connection was absolutely worlds apart compared to what it was like under Marcelo Bielsa. And a lot of fans were falling out of love with what was before a team so well connected with the city, with the fans, and everybody around the club. And Daniel Farke came in at a difficult time where players wanted to leave. You know, a big rebuild was needed, and new ownership were coming in. It was a tough task coming into us that season, and you know, he did well to recoup the players that he did. But not only that, but to sign some of the players that he's brought in, including Ethan Ampadu and Altanaka being two exemplary signings on the Daniel Farke period, and Joe Rodon as well. In my opinion, those have got to be the top 3 additions that Farke has made since joining the club. And it's easy to try and rewrite history, but I'm not going to do that. We were a broken team, and he stabilised the club, and he took us back to the Premier League. Again, he took us back after a year in the Championship, but the main thing is that we're back, right? And he did give us structure, and looking at us now, I think we're a lot better off for it. The Premier League is a different entity now to what it was when Leeds were relegated previously. And I think that the last few weeks especially has shown just how tough this league is, especially now. It's not as easy as it was a few years ago to have maybe stayed up. I think now it's shown it's even harder. The teams are getting even more full of quality. And you look at the bottom of the table now, it's anyone's game, really. Anyone can go down. I think the only one that you would say is nailed on is Wolves. I'm sure people will still say Burnley, but, you know, they've not been mugs this year, and Scott Parker appears to have changed a lot about his game. So, you know, the gap is getting so much bigger now, but the gap between relegation and mid-table is so small that a few wins and it changes you, but a few losses and you're right back there. And the competitiveness in the Premier League these last few weeks has shown. You look at us, for example, losing to Burnley and Forest, but beating West Ham. Again, playing teams in and around us, anyone can beat anyone. It shows the quality there is. There's nobody really other than Wolves who are languishing at the bottom. And it's not going to be like that this season. Now, this is the debate that's really splitting hairs and splitting the fan base. Was Daniel Farke backed in the summer? And, you know, me, amongst many other fans, I'm sure, would say that he was not fully backed by the 49 enterprises. That is not something that he can help. It's something which he called out for more backing. He called out for more Premier League attackers. I think some people forget his interviews twice in the summer, specifically when the team went out to Dublin, and he was literally begging for more attacking options. He said that we needed more strength in attack if we were to compete in the Premier League, and we didn't make those options available to him. You know, we signed Noah Okafor and Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Lucas Nemecha, but even then he was still wanting more. Deadline day, we went in for Harry Wilson. We failed to get him. That just shows that the club were out there trying to get that extra attacker in. The club know that they didn't get all the attackers they wanted. Whether Harry Wilson was at the top of their list, I doubt it. But it shows that they wanted that extra body in there. And the fact they didn't get that, surely that means that the window wasn't as good as it could have been and as good as they wanted it to be. We had Prague on the first day of the season saying we had an 8 out of 10 window. I don't know if I agree with that, to be honest. I do think there's many positions where we didn't really fully back Daniel Farke in. For example, getting that number 10 that we desperately wanted all summer never happened. Maybe that was because Daniel Farke knew he was going to play a different formation where the 10 wasn't going to be as massively influential. However, we still went in for players like Anemi Buendia. We didn't get him, and we didn't get the 10. We tried Harry Wilson, who's, I would say more of a winger, but can play in that 10 role. We didn't get him. I think the club has shown on a few occasions this summer, we wasted much of the window trying to sign Paxao, which many fans would have told you from the start that was a long shot. So I do think as much as Farke has, been victim to his own downfall, I do think one of the massive reasons for the downfall is that we just don't have the quality. We don't have the quality that the teams around us do have in terms of Premier League knowledge, experience, and quality caliber player. I'd say the most quality player we signed this summer was Noah Okafor. And to be fair, he's showing glimpses of the player that he can be, and that he's probably got more than enough quality to play at this level if Leeds were to go down and easily find a club in this league. Now, if we're going to flip this on its head, of course, most of us would agree that he wasn't backed. But even with bearing all this in mind, that does not excuse that there's many players that Farke is working with currently who are not being utilised to their maximum potential or at all. And Farke is just failing to get the best out of some of these players. I mean, you've got to look at players as easy as Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Of course, he's struggled with injuries in the past few years in Everton, but we know the quality he's got when you play to his strengths. He's just ineffective at the moment. The best thing he's done for us is he's great to play up front. He's a big, strong, tall lad. He can hold the ball up and get his head on things. But at the end of the day, we sign him to score the goals. We don't sign him to get his head on the ball. And he's not being utilised to be in the positions when he's needed to be to score the goals. Another one, in my opinion, is in the defence. I don't think Biol has played his best stuff. He's not been featured that heavily, but when he has played, I don't think he's looked better than Pascal Struijk. I know fans have called for Biol to come in, and like I say, Farke made that decision, but I do think that if we're looking ahead to this next game in Aston Villa, I do think you've got to see Struijk come back in the past two games, especially Forest. I think Biol was one of the worst lads on the pitch there. So I do think you've got to bring Pascal back into the team. And I'm quite a big fan of Brendan Aronson in terms of what he brings to the side. Not necessarily as a goal threat, but in terms of his overall work play, his energy in the team, and his work rate. And you can see why Daniel Farke wants him in the team and why he regularly picks him, even when he's not contributing with his goals or assists. He's a player which, no matter what, he'll run for 90 minutes. He just does not get tired. And he will continue to work hard. And that is so pivotal in the Daniel Farke system. It's sort of underappreciated. And I do think Aronson does go under the radar as a player where he's quite underappreciated. But that being said, he's still not getting the goals and assists as an attacker he needs to be getting to warrant constantly starting in the team. And I do think he can get those goals and assists in his game. He's shown he can get them. But I do think that's down to the way he's being utilised as well. And sometimes it's not even a thing about being utilised in terms of where he plays. I think sometimes he just needs to be dropped, where he can be overplayed sometimes. And he does need a break. And that sort of ties me into the next one of Wilfred Gnonto. I mean, we've not seen him kick a ball in a long time. Okay, a lot of that is down to injuries. But even when he has been fit, he's been training for 2-3 weeks now and didn't get a look in terms of starting on the pitch against Forest. So you look at somebody who you would have said at the beginning of the season is one of your most quality wingers at this level. The year we went down was one of the bright sparks in a really, really bad Premier League team in the attack. And he now can't get a look in. Someone that you tried desperately to keep for years whilst we was in the Championship. And now we've gone back up. and he can't get a look in. To me, that's just bizarre. And it's another reason for Farke not really making the most of the team that he's got to his disposal to get the best out of them. Now, for Daniel Farke, this is where my frustration kicks in with him. I do think his tactics, for me, is not what we need right now in the level we're at in the Premier League. A team that's trying to stay in the league without the quality that we really need to have. I do think we need to be going a lot more simplistic when it comes to style of play. And I do think we're a Premier League side trying to play like a championship team. And what I mean by that is the tempo in games at the minute is just so slow. You know, when we do press, it's not with intent, it's not with vigor. So when we lose the ball, we find ourselves exposed at the back with Premier League quality players coming at us, and Barjo Rodon and Goodmanson. It's a pretty poor back line in terms of Premier League quality. I do rate Jayden Bogle, and going forward and going back, he is very, very good. But in terms of that centre back role, I do think Pascal Stroke is a better player in terms of on the front foot, bringing the ball out of play. However, when he's got his back to goal or trying to face in front, fronting up a man and trying to stop him dribbling past him, I do think that's his weakness, because he backs off and backs off and backs off so many times until it's too late and that player gets a shot away and the ball's either ended up in the back of the net or he's crossed it to his teammate who's tapped home past whoever's playing in net that given week. So I do think that is a real tricky one for us in the defence. But then also you look at how other teams, defend, and we just cannot penetrate them because we just don't have that quality in the attack to make that killer ball. I'd say the strongest part of our team is the midfield. Ethan Ampadu has been, a great player for us in the Championship, and the first few games this season, it was immense. Same with Altanaka when he first started, and Anton Stark the first couple of games, but he's dropped off a lot. Sean Longstaff, for me, has been on par with Gabriel Goodmanson for signing of the season. I think, he's had his fair share of bad games. When he's had a bad game, it's not like he's the lone player. Everyone will have had a bad game. Usually, Longstaff, even if he don't play well, you can guarantee he'll run further than anyone else. He'll work harder than anyone else. Just like Brendan Aronson, you can see why he gets picked in the team. And he's one which for £12 million, a lot of fans sniffed at him. But when you look at it now, he's invaluable to us in terms of what he brings and what he offers us in both a defensive midfield role, but also going forward into the final third. Now, just to develop on the tactical issues side of things with Leeds and Daniel Farke is his overall approach to management. And what I mean by that is not how he is with the players, not how he is on the touchline, but it's the way he gets the team to set up. Now, last season, it was all about the 4-2-3-1. And that was a massive thing in terms of Daniel Farke's system, the double pivot and the number 10. Those were probably three most important parts of Daniel Farke's system last season. The wingers, they were interchangeable depending on who played each week. We had quality in those areas. But if one of the double pivot was missing, if it was Ethan Ampadu or Altanaka or Joe Rothwell last year, sometimes you would notice that with an Elia Gruev coming into the team, or even a Glenn Kamara the year before. And in the number 10, it was a massive drop-off from Gigi Rutter in his first season to Brendan Aronson in the second season. A lot less in terms of the output, in terms of goals and assists, but the work rate from Brendan Aronson was like that compared to a Rutter who was probably about there, and Aronson was about there in terms of work rate. But then the goals and assist ratio wasn't even a competition. Gigi was just immense, and to get 40 million from him was great business. Of course, that was his buyout, but at the end of the day, you cannot complain with that in the Championship. So tactically, this year we've seen him drift, and him being Farke drift towards a 4-3-3 with no number 10 and sort of a 6 and 2 8s, or however you want to look at it, a deep lying midfielder and two further forward, or a double pivot and just an 8 in front rather than a 10 who's really highly attacking. It all depends on how you want to look at it, and it usually consists of Ampadu and then either Tanaka, Longstaff, and Stack. Two of them will play alongside Amps. Recently, it's been Tanaka on the bench and Stack and Longstaff and Ampadu all playing. For me, I would go with, based on form right now, Ampadu, Tanaka, Longstaff. However, I can fully see the benefits of having Stack in the team. I can fully see the benefits of having a Stack and Tanaka in front of Ampadu, or having no Tanaka and having no Longstaff. Completely can vary, and it's probably our strongest area in the team. However, one of the tactically, it's probably one of the most underdeveloped. But what I mean by underdeveloped is we really don't get the best out of our midfield at times. I do think for the midfield that we've got, and in terms of the bottom of the table type midfield, it's one of the better midfield combinations. And, sometimes it doesn't look like that. And I do think that's something which Farke has got to hold his hands up and say, tactically, I can improve that area, not because the players aren't good enough, but because my tactics purely just aren't doing what they need to be doing. And I think the same can be said with going forward in the attack. I think at the level we're at, Dominic Calvert-Lewin should be a half-decent striker and should get you 10 goals in the Premier League at this level, 10 to 15. And he just doesn't look like he's really on it at all. Whether that's a confidence thing or whether that's a system thing, for me, it'd be more system-based. Because I do think you look at other managers and they would get better from Calvert-Lewin. I'm not saying he'd be a 20-goal-a-season man, but he'd definitely be having more than he is at the minute, which is sweet FA, effectively. So I do think that's a key component of the team that does need to be addressed, because we do not have that man who's going to go out there and score 15 goals, never mind 20. At the minute, the goals is spread across the team, but there's not many goals that we've scored at all. I think highest is Okafor on 2 goals for the season, which is not good at all. And Stack and Longstaff and Joe Rodon, who's also on 2. I mean, I think that tells you everything you need to know, to be honest. A team that wants to be staying up, you look at West Ham beneath us, even they've got a Jared Bowen who you can guarantee will get you 10, 15 goals and probably 20 goals and assists combined. Forest, I know they're in a bit of a shock position given where people would have expected them to be, but they've got Chris Wood and Morgan Gibbs-White. That will be enough, in my opinion, alone to keep them up. Wolves, again, I'm not saying they're going to stay up. They will not stay up. But, even a Strand Larsen, he's not a bad player. He's not a bad player. Probably could get a move to a Premier League club if Wolves, or when Wolves go down. I don't think he'll play in the Championship. And I feel like he'd be an option in this Leeds team. I think he'd probably start ahead of Dominic Calvert-Lewin at the minute. So that's definitely another option. And you look at the bottom half of the table, Burnley, it's a bit of a different system there. But, Jadon Anthony's been playing well. Not one of my favourite players at all. In fact, I quite dislike him. But Hannibal Medri, or however you say his name, at the end of the day, he's not a bad player, as much as it pains me to say it. So I do think there's definitely tactical improvements to be made. And I think that's really, really something which Farke has got to look at himself in terms of these next few games coming up, based on the players that we've played and the games we've previously played in the recent weeks, last month or so, and look at it and say what needs to change, because there's a lot which I look at personally and I think that's just not right. That really isn't right at all. And that does remind me, in fact, with Farke, something which is a real bugbear of mine, which has been going on since the Championship days when he first took over, It's when we're defeated, you know, or losing the game, he always resorts to bringing on every attacker off the bench, getting them on the pitch, getting as many players on the pitch in the attack, and just trying to hope for the best. And it never works. And I feel like, to me, that tactically does not make you look good at all. No matter what level you are as a manager, sometimes you can pull off if you've got the players for it to. But when you've got players which just are not up to it, the quality wise, it just screams of desperation, and it screams that you're panicking and you're not sure what else to do. So you feel like this is the best option to try and get something from the game, which to me is the wrong decision. Now, I just want to show you this screen. I mean, you look at this team here. This is from the Forest game. We've got Perry in goal. One, he's not causing any problems this year. Maybe that's definitely a good thing, something which we've lacked from a goalkeeper in recent years. But Darlow, some might say, was arguably unfairly dropped. I don't think he was putting a foot wrong at all. I thought he kept it in a few games, but I can understand Perry came in to be number one, so he's going to play. Goodmanson, for me, didn't have his best game at all. However, he was probably, in this game alone, in my opinion, one of the better players, if not the best player for Leeds. I'm not saying it was a high bar. The suggestions here would suggest otherwise, but we know what FOTMob's like. It's not the best in terms of rating players. And in my opinion, he's signing as some alongside Longstaff. Be all really not a good game. For me, I'd have had Strike start. I definitely will now. I was excited for him this summer. I do think it's maybe just a thing where he's not fit yet. Give him a bit longer to get fit, but I don't know if we have that time right now where I think we do need to just pick up points. We're in that sort of dogged area of, we're coming up with a poor off a poor run, coming up a tough run of fixtures now coming up. We just need to try and scrape some points. Even if we get a point in the next 3 or 4 games, that won't be bad. I mean, if we beat Villa miraculously, I think that would sort of carry us for the next 3 or 4 games to say probably, if we beat Villa, we can sort of afford to lose to City and Chelsea, respectively. And and we sort of say afford to lose. We're going to lose, in my opinion, to those two teams. You may have a sniff against Chelsea, but I don't think City, based on the form they're on, I don't think we're getting anywhere near them. That could be a record breaker, that game. But the rest of the team, Ampadu, I don't think had his best game. Rodon, a standard, subpar performance from him. We can do better. Same with Bogle. Aronson, works hard and you always got the assists. Nemecha getting the goal. Stack had a better game, but not his best in the lead shirt. Longstaff wasn't great, in my opinion. That was a poor game from him. And Okafor, it's one of them. It's a strange one. There's so much hype and talent around him. It's just, and when I say around him, I mean from him specifically. Around him, literally, that's why I think he's not getting the output he deserves. I think with a decent striker up front, he probably would get more goals or more assists at the very least. And when you look towards the bench, I think the best thing we can hope for is that, Dan James looks like he's going to be fit. Will that mean Brendan Aronson comes out of the team? Dominic Calvert-Lewin should be fit for the Villa game. Joel Piroux probably isn't going to start. Probably won't start again in the Premier unless there's major drastically injuries to both Nemecha and Calvert-Lewin. Pascal Strock should come back in. Jack Harrison again will be on the bench. And James Justin, again, is a backup to whoever's playing left and right back. And Altanaka, I would probably bring Altanaka into the team. I think we do miss his energy in midfield. It's something which was amazing to see against Everton on the opening day. It's gutted for me. It would be, I would probably drop Longstaff and go back to that successful midfield against Everton of Ampadu, Stack and Tanaka. I do think that was probably one of the massive highlights at the beginning of the season. So I would go back to that. Now, it says here Nonto injured, but he was on the bench for the last game. So Oh, unless I thought it was. That was it. He wasn't on the bench, but Farke had said that he'd played or he'd been practicing in training for 2 weeks and he didn't get picked, which a quality player of Nonto's ability should be in that team. I don't care what you say, to be honest, as disrespectful as that might be. I do think a player like that, just you cannot not have him at least in the squad on a match day, because having him to bring off the bench would have been a massive option, especially in this game where we went 2-1 down against the run of play with that Gibbs White one. We was trying to go for a goal to go ahead, and once that Gibbs White one goes in, it's then all hell breaks loose, and we give away the penalty 20 odd 30 minutes later, which Anderson slots away. So coming back, I do think that, again, the tactical issues is something which has really affected us. But I think that sort of leads me on to the next topic, player selection problems. Kind of touched on it just now a minute ago. I do think that Nonto should be in this team. Argument that Brendan Aronson should be dropped with his not producing the goals and assists that we so desperately crave. If other players were chipping in, I think you could probably afford to have Aronson in there and not have him scoring, but which in the Championship you can do when you've got Dan James that's going to get 20 plus goals and assists, and Joel Peru similar. But without that, I do think you do need as many players that are going to get you those goals and assists as possible, and I think Nonto offers you that in abundance. So I think on the weekend, when we get back from international duty, I think you've got to see Brendan Aronson leave the side for Wilfred Nonto. I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin back in striker. However, Nemecha, it'd be good to maybe see him get a game again. Scored a goal. Could do him a bit of confidence. Obviously, that's his second of the season for us in the league as well. Obviously, scored the penalty against Everton to win us the first game of the season. So I don't think that there's a good player in the Metro there. I think because of who Calvert-Lewin is and the wages that he'll be on, it sort of feels like he's got to play. He's the main number 9, but the Metro, I feel like he's going under the radar. We've got our own very, very, very low profile, minimal risk Isak Ekatike-esque debate here. We've signed the decent player supposedly on big money and he's not performing, and the one who's on the bench and wasn't really meant to be the first choice, he's not pulling up trees like Ekatike, of course, but he's scoring the odd goal here and there, and it's more than what Calvert-Lewin's doing, and that's what we need right now with the position we're in, because goals at the end of the day win you games. With Calvert-Lewin on that pitch, and he did come on, I don't think we'll have scored against Forest. Now, that's easy to say, but I personally just don't see it. He's not in the confidence. He's not in the right frame of mind in terms of the Calvert-Lewin of Ancelotti's era at Everton. I do think that he needs more time. I don't think he's fully fit either, which is no surprise because this is Calvert-Lewin we're talking about. But there's definitely a long way to go with him. And again, leading me on nicely to the next one is this one. How many more games does Farke have? And is this 5-game rumour, what do we all think to this? Now, for me, I do think that it's probably a bit of truth into this. I don't think there's any smoke without fire. So it's a rumour and nothing's confirmed. And I think that's it. There's no truth in terms of no reliable source has said this is definite. However, the 49ers are astute businessmen. Paraga said before he does contracts in his sleep, whether you believe it or not, he said it. And at the end of the day, they're not going to be sat here thinking everything's all hunky-dory. They're not stupid. They're smart guys. They're going to be looking at other people. They're going to have a plan, you would like to think. So, of course, the board wants stability, and they've said that we back Daniel Farke. There's many sources and many interviews where they say this, that Daniel Farke's their guy. They were questioned in the summer about the massive rumours of them sacking him after promotion, and instantly that was shut down almost straight away from Parag, who said that Daniel Farke's our guy. We're going to have him in the Premier League. He's never been back before in the Premier League. And, they sort of set him up for a summer which was going to see him have abundance of cash to spend and bring in abundance of quality players. And it's just not worked out like that. Now, do the 49ers see this as a window where they failed him, so they feel like they've got to stick with him and give him January? Or do they think, you know what, you've had a fair crack at the whip at this. We've given you, in our opinion, enough players to warrant being in a better position than we are doing and beating teams around us. That'd be fair from them. It would be fair because at the end of the day, they're entitled to their opinion. It's their money. However, I don't think they have backed Farke. I don't think they have given him the resources. Yes, Farke's got his own issues that need to be dealt with. But at the end of the day, the 49ers cannot say, we've backed you and you are not now performing. Daniel Farke will always be able to say, I haven't been fully backed. That doesn't mean, though, that Farke should still be here come January. That's not my opinion, but that's just the way it goes. Just because he's not been properly backed doesn't mean he warrants to be here in a year's time or in a few weeks or in a few months. But, of course, all fans want is stability. All fans want is sustain the league. Fans will be happy finishing in 17th, staying in the league on 1 point and getting that chance to just develop, improve the team and try and consolidate again another year as a Premier League team. Fans will be happy with that, trust me. Fans would take that. And if you wouldn't take that, I'd love to know why, because we're a massive club, but we do not have the right to think we should be mid-table, which is why part of me thinks, is Farke doing as bad as some people really think? Of course, we should have performed better in previous games. However, the Premier League is a different league entirely. Should we, as a newly promoted side, feel like we should be higher than 16th? Regardless of how we've played in matches, is 16th a bad position at this point in the table, in the league season? Is it a bad point? Consider bad place, considering where the bottom three sides of the last couple of years were, the newly promoted sides. I think, we've not been that bad. Farke's shown improvements from when he was last here in this league. And, the odds are still, I wouldn't say they're in our favour, but there's still very good chances that we stay in this league. And that is something which cannot be ignored. So when it comes to this topic of can Leeds turn it around? Well, yeah, of course they can. Of course they can turn it around. Who knows? We could go on a 5-game winning run from now past these next 5 games and everyone be looking, thinking, Farke's not going anywhere, staying to the end of the season, Leeds are staying up mid-table comfortably. You just don't know, do you? You just don't know. But we can only judge him based on what we see and what our eyes are showing us. And I don't think our eyes deceive us in terms of we're not performing at the moment. We've shown we can perform better than this, and players we expect from some of these better than what they're giving. So I do think, obviously, there's potential that it can be turned around. Will it turn around? And is Farke the man to turn it around? That is a question that's still yet to be answered. And many would have said that the run that we've just had is where Farke will be judged, when we're playing teams in and around us that we need to be getting points from. And we secured 3 out of a possible 12, 15. It's not good enough in terms of trying to stay in this league and beating the teams around you. And, West Ham, we beat them, but they've just won 2 games off this back-to-back. They've responded to their defeat. Burnley aren't playing badly. it's, and Wolves have plummeted so far down, but they've made the decision to sack their manager a month or two after giving him a new contract, a 3-year deal. They've made the decision to sack their manager. Now, they've probably, a lot of fans resigned themselves to relegation already, but they're still thinking, we'll sack him, we'll give him some money in January. It's not over till the fat lady sings. I'm not saying they're going to stay up, but they're giving themselves a big chance, to try and turn it around. And how bad would it be if they stayed up and we went down? When you consider at the same point, both teams were flirting with sacking the manager. One of them did it. So can we turn it around? We can. Will we? I'm not too sure, because the run's only going to get harder. We're not going to have an easier run than what we just had. So I think a lot would have to change tactically from Farke in the next week or 2 weeks, to even stand a chance, to be honest. And we'd have to have a lot of luck with teams around us dropping points, staying injury free, something else, because that's something we just can't do as a club, never mind in the Premier League, ever. So, of course, leading me on to my last point, and the point which you all want to hear about, you all want to talk about, and why we're all here at the end of the day. Can Farke stay? Of course he can stay. Will he stay? Probably. But should he stay? In my opinion, my honest stance, I'm not going to be Farke out. I'm not Farke out yet. Definitely not. He's earned trust off fans, rightly or wrongly. He got us up last year. And I don't think that's just going to disappear, especially from the 49ers point of view. I think that's still going to be in the forefront of their minds. And, sacking managers every time you struggle is exactly what puts clubs in a mess. And that is exactly what relegated us last time. Many thought Jesse Marsh should have been sacked, and I probably would agree with that in hindsight. But also in hindsight, it didn't get any better. It did not get any better after Jesse Marsh left. Now, there was a glimpses under Javi Grazia, but I don't think we was ever like, yeah, we're staying up 100%. I don't think I was ever like that, not under any of the managers afterwards. And especially after Grazia, it definitely just got worse. I mean, Big Sam, talk of desperation. So I don't think we'll sack Farke, not for a while yet. He won't be sacked in the next 4 weeks at least. I know that's not long in football, but a whole month away. I think you're getting towards near January, and then you think, do you sack him right before January? Depends if you want a new manager to come in and start afresh, or whether you think Farke deserves the chance to sign some players of his own. But then if you give him January, I think you've got to give him to the end of the season at that point, because a new manager then can't come in and bring in his own players after that. So if you're sacking him, I think you got to do it now. Not necessarily this week, but in the next couple of weeks, because you think he's going to be coming in with 4 poor run of games, in terms of games which we're just not going to win or not favoured to win. But then, we come up against Brentford, and then you have Crystal Palace back-to-back after we play Liverpool on the 6th of December. So those 2 games after Liverpool are definitely 2 which we can get results from, especially Brentford. Palace are a good side, but we can get a draw against Palace, and I'm not 100% sure if it's home or away, but at home I back us against anybody in this league. We played Tottenham and lost, but we put a good in account. Could have got a draw in that game, had chances to get more than 2 goals, could have won it, and one of them for Spurs, if not both, were contentious. At least one was a deflection. So I'm not here making excuses, but that's just the way it is. We could have picked up more points this year if things had gone our way, but also we could have picked up more points if we'd made the right decisions tactically in games. So it swings and roundabouts, and it's different courses for different horses, but it's all about what turns up on the pitch on the day and how you set up your team on the day, and that's what matters most. And Farke, most of the time, I do think does get it right, I would say, to begin with. It's when you hit 60 minutes and he's not sure what to do. He's not making substitutions when they need to be made. And he sort of throws everybody on with 10 minutes left. And you think, well, what's that going to do? And, you're 3-1 down, can't get back into the game. And that's the trouble with Farke. You just don't know what you're going to get from him game by game. So I would say I'm Farking, but he needs to adapt. He needs to become a bit more pragmatic. I think he's done well in terms of changing from his style from last year to this year. But I do think we need to assure ourselves a lot more defensively, take advantage even more of set pieces. We've improved a lot in them this season, something which needs to be improved on again in terms of defensively and also going forward. But I'm Farking. The pressure is real, but he has to turn it around and quickly because we haven't got time. Before you know it, give us 5 games and we'll probably be 19th in the league, 5 points adrift. So, he's not got time to mess about. He's really got to knuckle down and start picking up some points on the board again, and pretty quickly as well. So let me know your thoughts down below. Have you got any thoughts and ideas into what you think about Daniel Farke? Should he stay? Should he go? Are you Farke in or are you Farke out? How's the season been so far? Has it been an overachieving one for a newly promoted side? Has it been on par, or do you think there's been a lot of underachieving and underperforming and improvements to be made all over the gaff? Let me know what you guys think. Definitely one to chat about. And I'll see you in the next one when we're previewing the Aston Villa game post-international break. And I'll catch you later.